This is Guitar Business Radio, the podcast for the business of guitar. No reviews, no demos, no idle chatter, just useful dialogue and information to help you get the most out of your guitar-related business. Whether you're a guitar builder or a guitar player or just something in between, this is for you. Now, here's your host. Oh, wait, it's me, Jeffrey D. Brown. So let's get to it. This is episode 9 already, and next week we'll be celebrating a milestone of sorts. We'll be in double digits, and we'll be there, I guess, now for the better part of a couple years, so we'll not be planning the 100th episode party just yet, but it'll happen, and at this rate, probably sooner than we think. And I want to talk a bit about interviews. It's certainly the most common thing that podcasters do, as well as many broadcast shows. It's been around forever, and GBR is no exception. Our interviews are the predominant part of the show. And because we're a business show and our target audience is large and diverse, we have to deliver content that cuts across that terrain reasonably well. So what does that mean when it comes to determining who we put on the show in the top spot every week? Well, it's not complicated. You know how I feel about that. The interview, regardless of subject matter, occupation, industry segment, etc., has to tell a story that most people can relate to and or get value from. That's it in a nutshell. Very straightforward. And like many things that I talk about in the value shot, there are some boxes that have to be checked off to make it work. So I'm pleased to tell you that on this episode, we're talking with guitar builder Maegen Wells, whose story is one of determination and devotion to her craft that has really propelled her to new heights. You're going to really enjoy this, and we'll get to that in just a few moments. Now on to something else, and one of my favorite and necessary topics, and that is change. I've said from the very beginning that you could expect change on a regular basis with this show. Maybe it's just under the hood stuff or something more visible. One of the things that I can promise you is transparency, meaning we'll probably tell you about changes we've made or will make in programming or content or processes. I just think that in this day and age, it's good policy considering the extraordinary lack of transparency in government, business, institutions. You know what I mean? So just to bring you up to date, for those of you who are on this journey with us, and there's a lot of you for which I am very grateful, we've made a few tweaks and adjustments to fine-tune our course, and there will be certainly more, I'm sure. First, from a programming standpoint, we've put questionable moments into standby mode, meaning we haven't killed it off, just taking it off the regular schedule until we figure out how to make it more useful and beneficial for our listeners. You won't find the questions tab on the main menu of our site anymore, but you will find all the previous questions now accessible under the episodes tab labeled questionable moments if you're looking for that. Another change you'll notice is that we've removed the videos tab as well, temporarily. The reason for that is that the only thing available there were our video presentations of the value shot segments, and those have been taken down and off our YouTube channel. And here's the bigger reason for that. We've made a large and meaningful decision, even at this very early stage, to move most of our very young Supporting Roles program to the Patreon platform. Now, while we've kept a small part of the program, mainly our corporate sponsor platform, which really hasn't kicked in yet, that'll be on our own site, we felt, after a lot of deliberation, that it made sense to put the bulk of it on Patreon. I'm sure many of you know about Patreon. It's a hybrid crowdfunding site that really serves primarily the creative market, of which we are a part of, and so the tools that are available to us there allow us to get supporters, or patrons, if you will, as they like to call them, to get them involved with supporting the show and getting rewards and other benefits in return. It's not a one-time funding mechanism. It's not GoFundMe or Kickstarter. It's designed for the long haul, and that's why we like it and chose to set up shop there. Now, I'm not going to get into many details right now other than to say that it's designed to get a lot of folks involved and allow us to produce and deliver all kinds of unique additional content like the value shot segments and now with complete transcripts and other stuff that we're developing. And then we'll make it available specifically for our supporters on Patreon. So it's a win-win. At any rate, I would just say that I hope you'll at least take a look at our Patreon page. A lot of work went into it, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised when you see it. It's easy to find. There are plenty of links on our website, but you can just go to patreon.com/guitarbusiness or just search on the site for Guitar Business Radio. It'll come right up. Let us know what you think. This is your source for profoundly interesting news briefs. Guitar Business Radio presents The Shorts. Well, here's an unlikely item for the shorts, but I think this is important enough for many of you that I ought to spend at least a few moments on it. Now, this is not going to affect all of you, but if you're in any kind of a business that does business and collects any kind of data on people, whether it's an email address or much more, whether it sits on your computers or on somebody else's in the cloud, a very big change is coming in about 6 weeks. Some of you may already have heard about this, but I'm guessing many, if not most, have not. I mean, I'm in the thick of this business, and I didn't even know about it until a couple weeks ago. Maybe I just wasn't paying attention, but if I wasn't, neither were lots of others. So if you have a pen and paper, or your notepad on your phone or tablet is open, immediately jot down these 4 letters. GDPR. That's GDPR. And no, it's not a competitor of ours at Guitar PR. It does stand for General Data Protection Regulation, and it's an enormous slew of regulations passed by the European Union Parliament like a couple of years ago with a long preparation time. But now we're out of time. And on May 25th, a lot of things are going to change. And truthfully, even many of the largest multinational companies may not be ready for this. I've seen it. I've read about it. Now, I don't think there's need to panic, even though some are. But here's the deal. If your business collects or stores any personal data from citizens of the EU, there are compliance requirements that will affect all of us. Do you send email newsletters? Do you take signups on your website? Do you sell anything online? If so, you need to, at the very least, become familiar with what's happening so you don't get caught in a precarious position. You may have gotten notifications from some of your data processors like email service providers or cloud-based CRMs, shopping carts, whatever. Maybe you did like me and delete them thinking it had nothing to do with you. Well, in the last couple weeks, I've been getting a lot of material from our major data processors that finally caught my attention. We're a small company, comparatively speaking, but we do business globally. We have clients, customers, and subscribers all over the world, and definitely in the EU. And even though GDPR is tied only to EU residents, this legislation deals heavily with data that is exported outside of the EU. And these regulators or bureaucrats or whatever you want to call them, well-intentioned as they may be, are waving some pretty big sticks in the form of fines. So even though you think you might be immune to all this, it's very likely that while they may not come after you if you're outside the EU, they will come after your data processor who is, like in our case, in Australia, while we're in California. If we don't comply with the requirements of the GDPR, they could refuse to process data for us. Like, I don't know, send 20,000 emails a week for us, which they do. That's a big hit. So I'm hopeful, like a lot of folks, that the bigger result of all this will be a safer environment for all of us in terms of our personal data. It's a mess right now, but here's the concern I have. In all of my years at this, when a forced change of this magnitude comes along, there are always unintended consequences, even with the best of intentions. So keep a positive view of it. I am. But if you think GDPR touches your business or activities in even the remotest way, type those letters into Google and educate yourself at least a little bit. Well, Maegan Wells has been building guitars and mandolins for over a decade. She had the good fortune to learn from some of the best in the business. She knows what she's doing, and she does it well. But sometimes that's not enough. You need a strong, clear vision. You need drive and determination, and you have to love what you do. And as you will quickly find out, Maegan Wells possesses all of those traits and more, and she joins us today on Guitar Business Radio. Well, Maegan, thanks for coming on the show with us today. Great to have you.
Oh, thank you so much, Jeff. Thank you. It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Well, look, let's jump right in. I told you that I think you have a great story, a story of personal vision, determination, hard work, doing what it takes, and then seeing it start to pay off in a major way. So let's talk a little bit about your early vision and how you got up to speed in those first few years.
Yeah. Well, when I first decided that I was going to be a guitar maker, I pretty much knew right from the beginning that someday I wanted to have my own shop where I was building my own instruments from scratch, by hand, and alone. I never had a vision of wanting to run a production shop or having even a team of people working for me. I always just kind of knew it would be a solo journey, me, my shop, my own designs. And I also knew it was probably going to take a while to get to that point. So I planned on spending about 5 to 10 years studying the craft and gaining experience in a variety of shops, and ultimately earning a long-term serious apprenticeship somewhere, which is exactly what I did. And I started off at Brian Gallup's School of Luthery in 2006, and I graduated from his program in 2007. And about 2 months after that, I got a job working at Reverend Guitars, which is an electric guitar company that was in Detroit at the time, but I believe now they're located in Toledo, Ohio. But I worked for them doing fretwork and setups and finish work. And about a year later, in 2008, I moved to West Virginia to apprentice with an acoustic guitar maker named Andrew White. And I spent just under a year there working with him. And it was in 2009 when Tom Rebecki, who's a world-class archtop guitar maker, offered me an apprenticeship in his private shop. And so I moved out to California, and I worked for him for 5 years, learning all the ins and outs of archtop guitar construction. And I worked for him all the way up until the very end of 2013.
Yeah, I can see how that would be very helpful to have that kind of guidance along the way. Let me just kind of go back a step. And one of the things that I wanted to try to understand was what it was early on that inspired you. You said you wanted to become a guitar maker. But what I'm interested in knowing is, what was it that really drove you to that? What were your interests at the time? And were there things as you were growing up or, as a teenager, or that sort of got you to that place?
Yeah, well, I had been a guitar player ever since I was about 7 years old. Wow. And I was pretty, by the time I was about 9, I started to take it pretty seriously. It was, my whole world was just playing guitar, and it was my passion. And, along with woodworking, ever since I was very young, I was just drawn to working with tools and wood. And my dad, I remember when I think I was about 11 or 12 years old, he put a chainsaw in my hand. He was cutting down some trees. He was cutting down some trees in the front yard, and I was just watching him, and I was just like, give me that chainsaw. I want to do that, There was just something about using this incredible tool to process to cut down this tree and then cut it up, and then, moving the whole thing. I was just, so those were really the two things in my life at that point that I had been, had found any passion in. And, I took woodworking classes all throughout high school, and so when the light bulb came on, like what I call the Luthery light bulb, it came on, and it was instant, because it was the two things in my life just combined in one. And, and that was, ever since then, I've been doing this pretty much. Like literally a week later, I was in a repair shop begging someone to let me work there. So, So it was just music and woodworking combined together. And I've never looked back.
Did you have any pushback at all from anybody? Was there anybody that was not encouraging you or saying, no, you really got to do something different? Because certainly I've talked to a lot of folks that have gone into this business in their early years. They were not necessarily encouraged. I mean, some of them were, and certainly some of them were not, but any pushback or just a lot of support?
Well, I'll have to say that every great mentor I've ever had has told me not to do this.
Oh my gosh! Really?
They've all, it was just a fair warning from the very beginning. Like, hey, kid, this is not what you think it is. This is not just, rainbows and guitars and lollipops. Like, this is, a life of financial uncertainty, and, you're probably better off going to college. And, every step of the way. Now, my parents, on the other hand, from the very beginning have been nothing but supportive, even through the times where I was just like, so defeated. They've always encouraged me to keep going. But, the people who are in it and in the trenches, so to speak, really doing it, everybody's given me their warnings. But I also know that I've made them very proud by not running away from it and by not giving up. So, and I would give the same warnings to anybody else coming to me asking, and I do, this is, at times I didn't know if it was possible. So,
it always seems to come down to, I've, often heard the question, how bad do you want it? You have to want it, and,
yeah.
It sounds to me like you did.
Yeah, I did. And, you can sit there and say, oh, I don't care about those things, or, but the truth is you have no idea. You really have no idea if you don't have any experience there. And then certainly as you get older, those priorities change. And some of the things that people were telling me 10 years ago, I'm just, oh man, they make so much sense now, and I'm feeling it and I'm living it, and I'm so grateful I had that advice, but I didn't fully understand it at the time.
Is there anything that comes to mind that would kind of be an example of that? I mean, can you think of something that somebody might have told you years ago, and then you kind of had some kind of an epiphany or an enlightenment or something, or you just got it years later? Is there anything in particular that comes to mind at all?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And it seems, it's pretty basic. It was pretty basic advice, but it was in 2007, and Kathy Wingert, one of my heroes,
I know her.
Amazing guitar maker. I had called her. I called her a few times right after I got out of Gallup, and then another time while I was working at Reverend Guitars, because I wanted to work for her. And she told me the first time I called her, she was like, Maegan, take the money you would use to move to California and buy a bandsaw. She was like, you can do this. You don't need anybody. And the second time I called her, this is 2007, the economy was collapsing. It was, not a good time financially for anybody. And Kathy, who's like, Maegan, you need to go to college. You need to stop this and go to college, and then do this on the side, but you need to get some sort of security. And, and I kept telling her, Kathy, no, I don't want to do that. That's not what's next for me. And she just said, kiddo, you might feel differently in 10 years. And it was just so, and now here I am more than 10 years later. And, it's not like I'm sitting here thinking, oh, I should have gone to college, but it really was like, wow, I do do feel differently today about certain things. Money is important to me, and not in a superficial way, but it's. And when I was 17, I was like, oh, I don't care, and she was just, that conversation, she was so real and honest with me. And it meant the world to me that my hero was being so real with me. And it stays with me. And I also know that that's something that's going to keep revealing itself over time. It doesn't just stop in 10 years,
No, of course not. It's a constant thing.
It is. It is. And it's kind of just that awareness that, like, how you feel right now might not be the way you feel forever. And it's an evolution, and things change and you grow. And so that's, I guess that's the one thing that really sticks out with me. And, I'm still so thankful for her, and that she was just so honest with me. It was very special.
Well, internally you had a compass, and, whether you consciously or whether it was something else inside of you that knew where you were going to go, and you ended up following that. A lot of people don't. A lot of people sort of relinquish. I mean, I certainly did on multiple occasions, and took me. I don't regret anything. I've had a great life. And as I'm older now, it's really important, to do the things that I love. And so that's why I think I'm so impressed with the way that you've started off. You have already a half a lifetime under your belt, and you're still very young from my standpoint. And, that's, and so it's a very inspiring thing.
Thank you.
Let's move up a little bit and talk about the business a little bit. And even though you may have still been struggling, so to speak, to kind of break through on your guitar making, I want to know, at what point did you feel you actually had a business of your own, and that was what you were going to be doing? There's a time when that happens, and I'm wondering if you can recognize it and tell us about it.
Well, I think there's perhaps a difference between when it started and when I felt like it was actually happening and working. It was in 2012, 2013 is when I started to build my own shop here in my home. And it's the same shop I have here now and that I'm working out of. And that was when I really started building my shop and designing my own instruments and building my own guitars. And I was still working at Tom's, and so that was really, really when it started. And but it really didn't start to feel like it actually happened until about last fall, really, the fall of 2017. And it was an accumulation of events, because I was kind of, at that point, I was kind of 4 years deep into what I call my angry and bitter phase, which is maybe also just the startup phase. I'm realizing, but I had at that point, I had been doing this for a while. I kind of felt like I had done all of the things I was supposed to do, but financially, I was in a really bad place, just from supporting myself as an aspiring guitar maker for so long, and being able to apprentice and do these different things and go to guitar shows. And, when you're just constantly investing in something all on your own, at some point I was just like, I thought, okay, well, what I did is I used my credit cards basically to, build my shop and buy my materials. And I figured, okay, well, I'm going to build these instruments and build my shop, and then I'll sell the instruments and then I'll pay off the debt. Right. And that's just not how it played out. I did all of those things, but the instruments didn't sell, and they didn't sell for a few years, really. And they were great instruments. But it's just, it takes time. And I knew that, and I'd been telling myself that but I thought as, Tom's apprentice, and I had been doing a good amount of guitar shows for a long time. I thought that, people were saying they wanted my guitars, and it took time for them to sell. And in that time is when I kind of had to go off and get other jobs and to pay the bills. And, but last fall, one by one, they all started to sell. And then the guitars that I was in the middle of building started to get bought up. And then people started placing orders. And I mean,
you weren't surprised. Were you surprised by that? Or
I was flabbergasted, Jeff. I was in total disbelief, because at that point I had kind of told myself, well, this just isn't possible to make a living doing this. And I was telling myself that to make myself feel better, right? Because if it's possible, but yet I'm not achieving it, then that made me feel terrible and like a failure. But if I take it off the table altogether as an option, it's not me. It just isn't possible. So I had, that was kind of what I was telling myself. And so when things started to turn around, it did not line up with my not possible theory, and the people who are close to me in my life and who've been watching me go through this, they view that as my tipping point. They're like, Maegan, this is happening now. Like, you need to, and I'm like, no, I don't know what's going on, but I couldn't believe it. And it was honestly in, just like 2.5 months ago at NAMM, I displayed as a part of the Boutique Guitar Showcase. Mm-hmm. And
I saw you. I saw your stuff there. It was nice. Very nice.
Right. Yeah. Thank you so much. It was such an incredible, the Boutique Guitar Showcase was an amazing setup. I cannot say enough about it. And it was so great to be there. And I knew it was going to be crazy because it's NAMM, right? But yeah. I could not believe the number of people who came to my table, who knew my work. They knew my story. They've been cheering for me for years. And I was blown away. And I left there thinking, oh my gosh, this is it. This is my chance that I have been working so hard and for so long, this is it. And so it's so recent. It's so recent that I really feel like it's all been taking off. And I was never going to give up. I was never going to stop doing this. I just didn't think I was ever going to be able to, do this full time. And my mission has always been, I want to build as many instruments in my life as I possibly can. And my heart was breaking because I thought that was going to be, it was kind of looking like that wasn't going to be able to be a whole lot. And I know I have it in me to build hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of instruments. I know I have that in me if I could just have the time and the money to do that. And
now it's happening. Now it's starting to happen.
It's happening. Yeah. It's happening. It's happening. Yeah.
And it's, do you feel, well, let me ask you, I mean, given what you said and what's happening, has your day-to-day life been altered in any way? I mean, have you had to make adjustments that you didn't expect you were going to have to make at all? Or?
Well, I can tell you the biggest change is, I'm working harder than ever. This is go time. And I was working really hard this whole time. I really was. I was giving it everything. But I feel like now I feel like I've been going uphill for years. And now life is giving me a little bit of a downhill. And I can either walk it and catch my breath, or I can just keep running as fast as I possibly can and keep the momentum going. And that is what I am doing right now. And I'm building multiple instruments at a time, which I could never afford to do before, but now I can afford to buy materials for 4 guitars. I can buy lacquer for 4 guitars, cases, tuners, everything. All of that, I could never afford to do that all, and without a down payment or something. And
sure.
So now I'm building. I like to have 2 instruments in construction phase and then 2 instruments in finish phase, and that seems to be a good cycle for me right now. And a series of wonderful events and opportunities has led me to, I'm now working at Luthier's Mercantile International, LMI. So they offered me a job about a year ago, and I'd been working at a coffee shop for the last 4 years, and still building instruments.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. And I was still building, but, my time was very limited, and so were my finances. But shortly before life started getting better, LMI, that was kind of what really kicked it all off. LMI offered me a job, and, I actually applied for a job there at the same time I applied for a job at the coffee shop, and I didn't get it. And, which was fine. I love them there. And, but so they offered me a job last May, and that allowed me to quit the coffee shop. And, so now I work at LMI Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And then I am home in my shop Thursday through Sunday. And even on the days that I'm at LMI, I'm home by 4:00, and I usually spend 4 to 6 hours down in the shop in the evenings. And, so I can officially say for the first time in 12, almost 13 years that I'm building guitars full time. So,
well, I would imagine that having the LMI connection is beneficial to you. I'm sure how could you not pick up knowledge there about a lot of different things? I would imagine. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing. I mean, I work in the afternoons. I work in their wood shop helping process the materials, and it's that in itself is just like today. Today in a matter of 4 hours, I had my hands on 600 pieces of 3 different species of spruce.
And who else can say that? That's.
Exactly. Whereas a year ago, it was like, oh man, I made 50 lattes this morning and, 20 dry cappuccinos.
Well, but it's all part of it. It's all part of the R&D of life. Let me move toward a little bit of as I call the weeds of the business. I'm just kind of curious, now that you're really kind of starting to move into, maybe we could call it major league. I mean, you've probably been in that for a while. Do you have is there any marketing or sales activities that you've started to engage in at all that have had a positive effect for you at all?
Well, the one thing that, I'd say there's 2 things really. One of them being social media, which is something that I try not to give too much attention to, because I find it's a huge distraction, and but it seems to be, it's necessary in terms of a free way to get your work out there, and just say, put a flag in the ground and be like, this is Maegen Wells Guitars and Mandolins, here's my work. And so, and all of the following I've developed on social media has just been very, very natural progression. And I definitely, I don't use Facebook a whole lot, but Instagram has been an excellent platform for me. I can just, it's a way for people to see what's happening in my shop, and they can see the way I do things, and that it is just me, and that it's, there's a huge history on my Instagram page of me building instruments for many, many years. So people can go back and see that, and it gives them, kind of confirms my experience and my level of work and things like that. But the guitar conventions have been a huge help. And it's funny because you would have told me I'd be saying this 2 years ago, I would have never believed you, because for a couple of, for those first 3 or 4 years where I was displaying at shows like the Woodstock Invitational or the Santa Barbara Acoustic Instrument Celebration, or, even the Healdsburg Guitar Show or the Montreal Guitar, all those amazing shows, I would go, and every time I'd leave and I'd be like, man, why do I keep doing this? I can't afford to do this. I can't afford to be here.
It's expensive and it's a lot of work. Yeah, I know.
It is a lot of work. And I was starting to feel like, oh man, you just want to hang out with your friends, because you go to these shows and it's like you get to see all your friends that you never get to see. And it's kind of like, you start feeling like, I was like, man, I need to learn how to say no to an invitation. You feel like you get invited to something, you have to take it. And so for those first couple of years, I would kind of get down. I would never go there like expecting to sell, but I don't know what I was expecting, but I wasn't seeing the results I was hoping for. But again, just like anything, it takes time.
And it's an investment. It's an investment. I mean, I've done lots of those things over the years, and you have to think of it. A great friend of mine, as I've spouted this stuff all the time, is the best way he would describe how things progress is gradual, sequential, and cumulative. And these are some of the things that I never forget. And when I get frustrated, or if I don't think the pace is right, I kind of go back to these sort of tried and true principles and remind myself that that's really the way things unfold. And, when you look back, I mean, you can look back now at the last 3 or 4 years, or even the last 10 years, and you can see from, where you've come. And that's always kind of inspiring, don't you think?
Yeah, it is. It really is. Sometimes it can be so hard to remember to stop and do that, it's to just like reflect and and see your progress. And all you can kind of do is focus on. It's funny how that is, but it is. It's so important to stop and do that, because it reminds you to just keep putting one foot in front of the other. And, it's something that someone once told me was 2 steps forward and 1 step back is still progress.
Exactly.
And
it's a net plus. It is. It really is. Let me ask you one more thing on the business. This is kind of, and I don't know, how you would answer it, but as far as the business side of what you're doing, what would you say is your highest priority in the managing of your business? Because everybody looks at it differently. Do you have a sense of that at all?
Time management is the highest priority for me, it's not difficult for me either. I really enjoy it. Because I'm at a point where I know the whole process A to Z. I know about how long it takes me to do it the way I do it. I know how, where and when to expect the disasters. So I always plug that in. And, and these guitar shows help me do that too. I can, because I got to have guitars on that table that I paid $800 for. So that's talk about a deadline, So I've really gotten good at knowing how long it really is going to take me to get something done and what I need to do every single day in between in order to meet that deadline. And I take it very seriously. And I have a book that I write in every single day. I write, and that book is the first thing I look at when I wake up in the morning, and it's the last thing I look at the end of the day. And I make my lists of what needs to be done. And every list too. If you have a to-do list, and at the end of every day, if every single thing is crossed off, then you didn't really make a good list. Like, there needs to be one, or that means you're not pushing yourself to the maximum capacity. You really do. So that's kind of how I do it. And that to me is the most important thing. And finances are important as well, obviously, but those things can be a little uncomfortable at times. And I've learned to deal with that discomfort. That's just kind of like the nature of the beast. But to me, the most important thing is time management. I will always figure out a way to make the money appear, to pay the bills, to get the wood. I'll always figure out a way to do that. But to me, the most important thing is, making sure I glue something every day or spray some lacquer. You have to make sure, because there's like a couple hundred steps in making a guitar,
of course,
so
yeah.
You really have to keep, and it can be, if you're only on step 3 and you're looking at it can be really easy to just like run back in your room and, hide under the covers. Like, you have to keep it organized and simplify it, so that's the most important thing to me, absolutely, is time management.
Let me, as we start to get toward the close here, before we wrap it up, let's just hear a little bit about what you're building right now. I know you've told me you're doing mostly arch tops and mandolins. Mm-hmm. What can you tell me in terms of how you would differentiate yourself and what you're doing? Because I've looked at your instruments and they're stunning, and it looks to me like you have a style that's your own. How would you describe it?
Well, I feel like I'm in love with the traditional arch top. I love traditional arch tops. And my goal with my instruments is to have a sense of that tradition, but for the modern player. And so an arch top doesn't need to be 18 inches.
Yeah,
it doesn't.
It's huge.
That's huge. It's huge. Now, if you want that, by all means. But, you don't have to have a huge body to have a huge voice. I know that. And so I kind of typically end up building smaller body arch tops in the 15-inch, 16-inch range. 16.5 is a really great size as well. And so smaller body arch tops are kind of my thing. And again, I'm not trying to just turn my back on tradition because it's what's inspired me to do what I'm doing now. So I do want my instruments to reflect that my love for traditional arch tops. But I'm a modern builder, and I have the privilege of working with some beautiful materials, perhaps materials that aren't traditionally used with arch tops, which is basically just maple. I love maple and I work with a lot of maple, but, I'm not afraid to try something different. And I also, I'm trying to build arch tops that are going to attract all different kinds of players. So many incredible musicians tell me all the time, "Oh, I wish I played arch tops." And it's like, well, what do you mean? Like, you play guitar, right? But if they have it in their mind that if they're not a jazz player, then they shouldn't be playing an arch top. And that just is such a shame to hear that, because these instruments are capable of doing anything you want them to do. If they're, at least that's the goal for me with my arch tops. I want you to be able to play instrumental fingerstyle music on it. I want you to be able to, throw some distortion on there if you want to, anything like that. I really want to break down those barriers. I don't want to put my instruments in some kind of musical straitjacket. And I feel like arch tops, above a lot of other guitars, are totally in a musical straitjacket. So it's kind of that's kind of my goal there. People who are also, they love the traditional arch top, but they're ready for the next phase of those instruments. So that's kind of my goal.
I was going to ask you about your vision for the future and what's the big destination. You've kind of answered it in that respect. Is there anything grander than that? Do you have a broader sense of where you want to go? Because I know you've kind of said this from the beginning, but maybe there's a closing thought on that.
It's now is just build as many guitars and mandolins as I can. I crossed off all the other things on the list. That is what is left. So I'm so excited and thankful to be at this point. But now, glue something every single day, move forward. So that's what everybody can expect from me from here on out. Just as many instruments as I possibly can. So,
well, that's an incredible perspective and a great vision. I'm so happy to to have been able to have this chat, and I know that I'm going to want to check back with you on a regular basis, and hopefully many of our listeners will want to do the same thing after listening to you, and they can get more information. It's MagenWellsGuitars.com.
You got it. Yeah. MagenWellsGuitars.com is my website. And you can follow me on Instagram at Maegen Wells Guitars. And that's really the best way to see what I'm up to in real time in the shop. So
awesome. Okay. Well, listen, thank you so much for being with us today, and I wish you all the best. We'll talk again soon.
Thank you so much, Chef. Thank you.
So in previous episodes of The Value Shot, I've talked a lot about simple tools and methods I use in business, and in some cases in my own personal life. Things like the 3 C's, the perils of the expectation game, the difference between disagreement and offering another opinion, and of course, my criticism classification system. Now, earlier in the show, I explained how we're now making these Value Shot segments available with specially produced audio versions, along with the written transcriptions for each one through our Patreon portal. We'll also be adding more materials on a regular basis, but more importantly, what's the value here? For instance, why bother with the transcripts? Well, first of all, reading is different than listening. We internalize the information differently, and if you think what I'm saying makes sense, but you're not sure how it affects you or how you can benefit from it, it might be a good idea just to read what I said. The transcripts are not long, usually the equivalent of 2 or 3 8.5 by 11 pages. It's not that much. Remember how I've talked ad nauseum about simplicity and foundational stuff. And really, this is simple stuff when you break it down. I think that's part of the reason why this may be hard for some people to grasp, because we've been programmed for years to believe that complicated is better, and our everyday assumptions support that. As a result, when simple solutions, in this case, very basic ideas, are presented, we can easily dismiss them because they don't meet our complexity threshold, as silly as that sounds. Now, if you're thinking something like, what the hell is he talking about? Or something along those lines, and I would just have to say that quite possibly you're not taking what I say at face value. That's really all you have to do, and because many of the tools I use and recommend are just checkoffs, kind of like a true-false question. The task is easy. If you check the box, it's true. If you don't, it's false. Same principle. The main difference being we want to get to the truth, so to speak, and nothing but the truth. And really, don't many of you already use this method in your daily lives? Do you make a to-do list of some kind and check the boxes when you've completed the task? How about a grocery list? Do you do better at the grocery store with a list than without? And I know some of you will say you'd rather improvise or do it on the fly. That's fine. But I would probably offer up the alternative opinion that there will be times when winging it just doesn't work. And the question is, how big are the adverse results of not having the list? I can tell you that I've tried and used many, many high-tech methods to keep track of tasks. And while I've had some success in using CRMs and calendars, especially on my phone, and before the phone calendar, I was terrible with dates and events, even after spending a lot of money on all kinds of leather and titanium calendars. But the phone finally made it work for me. I'm not entirely sure why, but it did. On the other hand, it's kind of a funny thing. When it still comes to tasks, I've always had to ultimately revert back to my simple analog notepad, which I usually stock up on every time I visit the printer we use. They give them away. I write my to-dos neatly on the pad with check boxes. The more boxes I check during the day, the better I feel. I'm inspired to check more, and so on. Conversely, a day with few checks can be discouraging. But even so, at the end of the day, I let it go, knowing that tomorrow brings a new list with the empty boxes carried over and a new opportunity to check more. So here's the takeaway. I love techie stuff, innovation, gadgetry, etc., and I gravitate to it and tend to assume that naturally those things are the solution. But really, if you can't make the analog notepad work for you, what makes you think a more complicated solution will do any better? If you don't have the focus or the discipline, it probably won't. So how do you optimize your focus and discipline? Well, that's a really big question, and I'm sure many people can expound on it indefinitely. But here's my quick take. Make it simple. The simpler things are, the easier they are to focus on. The clearer your focus is, the less likely you are to get sidetracked. Have you noticed what it feels like when your desk or workspace gets piled up with a ton of things to deal with? And the more it piles up, the less productive you get? It's kind of a variation on diminishing returns. It doesn't feel good. Now, I know some people say they thrive on that entropy of sorts. I don't always buy that, and I think for many of them it's an excuse. But think what it feels like when we take the time to clear the workspace and create some order. All of a sudden, what seemed insurmountable now appears manageable and nothing like what you were imagining. And now you can breathe again. So here we are, folks. That's in large part what I've been talking about. That's a form of resimplification. And that leads me to this question. How do we bottle that and reuse it as needed? And I'll discuss that in more detail on upcoming episodes. So thanks for listening. And as always, stay positive, stay focused on the destination, and keep all your options open on how you're going to get there. And I'll see you on episode 10. And that's it for this episode of Guitar Business Radio. Thanks for being with us. You can stay tuned and stay in touch at guitarbusinessradio.com.